I want to start by saying a few words about Mr. Rentschler and his relationship with the American Heritage Center. It actually began in 1957, the year I was born. Notice the white hair. And when he was contacted by Dr. Jean Gressley, who was then the head of the center, and they talked about the possibility of him donating his important collection of Western art to the center. In the end, he and his family donated not only the art, but created an endowed fund to support not just the art, but to support this endowed lecture on a regular basis. George was born in 1892, and in 1936 he married Rita Mitchell, with whom he had 3 sons. Upon his death in 1972, Rita donated 10 Western paintings by Henry Farney and one by Frederick Remington, on the condition that they be displayed in a replica of his company office, he was a CEO, at One Sutton Place in New York City. That replica is across the exhibit hall, and the paintings are hanging in it, and I invite you to visit it after today's lecture. 4 other Farney works were given originally to his son in 1972, who displayed them in their home until he passed away in 2011, and his widow Pam Rentschler donated them to the AHC at that point. She still takes an active interest in the American Heritage Center, and the AHC was in fact visiting here just in September. She's really pleased and excited with every Rentschler lecture that we have here. So, welcome.
Thank you.
So let me introduce our speaker tonight. Dr. Michelle Delaney embodies many of the contrasts of the American academic and museum world. Academically, she began her studies not far from home at Manhattan Bill College in Westchester, New York, just north of New York City. She continued her work in American Studies at Georgetown University, where she earned a master's and wrote a local dissertation on Mamie Eisenhower and her public role while her husband was president of the United States in the 1950s. Michelle then went to work in the photographic history collection of the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, ultimately rising to become the collection's curator, never really leaving the East Coast corridor. And here's where the contrasts begin. In the 20-teens, Michelle decided to work on a PhD and started working at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, Scotland. Her dissertation topic, none other than that epitome of the American West, Buffalo Bill. She strove to understand how his Wild West show portrayed Western culture and achievements. And during that time, and since then, she has made many trips to Wyoming, especially to Cody, where she worked extensively in the archives of the Buffalo Bill Center of the West. Perhaps that explains why the Smithsonian staff now consider this Eastern woman to be one of their go-to people for all things American West. I will note that when she made that observation to me last night, I thought a look of disbelief crossed her face. After completing her PhD, and all of which happened while she was continuing to work at the Smithsonian, some of us actually had the luxury of working only on our dissertations when we wrote them. Dr. Delaney moved over to the National Museum of the American Indian, where she has been for a number of years, and she now serves as its acting associate director of research and scholarship. She has edited several books on the history of photography and curated at least 25 Smithsonian exhibitions. Today, Dr. Delaney is here to speak to us about her Buffalo Bill research before she spends the next 2 days delving into the AHC's Buffalo Bill collection, where hopefully she will get inspired to write something anew. The title of her talk today is Art and Advertising in Buffalo Bill's Wild West.
Thank you so me know if this is okay. I get louder, let me know. Sometimes I get quite enthusiastic about what I'm about to talk about. So you have heard my background. I am Michelle Delaney, and I have spent just about the entirety of my professional career at the Smithsonian, and still enjoy it. And I've been talking to all of the staff here at the AHC today, and really am super impressed. And it's taken me too long to get to Laramie, and I want to come back. I haven't even got into those boxes tomorrow for the archives. So we're going to talk a little bit about art and advertising in Buffalo Bill's Wild West, the creative connections and Cody's community. And whether you know it or not, you're a part of the Cody community, at least from my perspective, because there's a lot of material here. And I see it as untapped. Gem of a collection. So I can't say enough about how I have been treated today, and how many wonderful people I've met here, and how much I want to work more and introduce you to more of the people that I know. So I do have the pleasure of working at the National Museum of American Indian now, and leading curatorial and exhibitions and repatriation. Three areas that I am very dedicated to, and please encourage all the folks you know who want to be interns or fellows at the Smithsonian to do so, and I'm happy to talk to any of them. But I am not going to read a paper today. I want to be more conversational with you all, and I hope you enjoy hearing more about my journey over the last 20 years. It was 20 years ago that I became quite interested in Buffalo Bill's Wild West. More interested, I think, than anyone at the Smithsonian has ever been. Because of a collection of photography at the National Museum of American History. There is a collection by a photographer named Gertrude Casebier, who worked in New York City. And when the Buffalo Bill's Wild West came through in 1898, she had a friend who knew William F. Cody, Buffalo Bill, and asked if she could photograph some of the Native American performers who were with the show that year. And so about 12 of them were photographed. You'll see a photograph later. It got some attention from researchers, but no one was really researching who these men and some women were. So I thought maybe it was about time to do that. I didn't know I'd still be talking about it 20 years later. But those individuals are important to me. That collection has been more utilized, and I have benefited in so many ways. So I know that you have quite the railroad collection here. So I wanted to start talking about advertising and the private and stock cars that made the Wild West possible. Without the railroad, without the crazy level of logistics that it would take to move hundreds of people and hundreds of animals, and all of the grandstand, sometimes on a daily basis, it couldn't have happened. And the Wild West Company of Buffalo Bill and his early partners did it on their own for a while. And then, I don't know if you can see, one of these is his private car. It says Cody on it, on the right here. James A. Bailey of Barnum and Bailey became part owner of the Wild West, and then they had access to all of the routes that Barnum and Bailey were using for their circus as well, both here in the US and in Europe. So it was a very complicated logistical adventure. And of course, sometimes there were wrecks, and very sadly, injuries, and sometimes even death in that. So all of the possible things that could happen, you know, with moving hundreds of people and hundreds of animals and putting on a show twice a day, with a grandstand that was between 10,000 and 20,000 seats. So it's fascinating to me. And here are some of the the cars, probably the advertising cars. There was advertising car number 1, advertising car number 2. A lot of the work had to be done in advance. The advance work for art and advertising at the Wild West, the cars would be full of the bill posters. All those men, usually, who were out there 2 weeks ahead of the schedule, so that all of the posters would be in shops, they'd be on buildings. You'll see in some of the slides that I have coming up, all of the information to get people excited and get ready to come and see this, as Cody would say, educational exhibition. It's not a show. This is the one poster that I could find that actually had a train on it. There are upwards of 550 posters that are existent still in the collections of Buffalo Bill Center of the West, the Ringling Museum in Sarasota, Florida, the Circus World Museum in Baraboo, Wisconsin. Those are the 3 museums that I worked with most on this art and advertising dissertation that I did. And all of this comes from thinking about how photography was integrated into the Wild West because of that one collection that I was working with at Smithsonian. And I feel a little bit like history detective in putting all of this together, and the materials that are here I've really yet to fully understand, so I'm very excited about the legal and business records that are here at the center that will finally help me put pieces together about the poster art and the work both in the US and in Europe. So I wanted to show you something that was truly the culmination of all of my dissertation work. I don't know if any of you know Jeremy Johnston, who was a curator up in at the Buffalo Bill Center of the West and the Buffalo Bill Museum. He and I co-curated this. He was very sick at the time and has passed away, sadly, but he and I worked on our dissertations together. He was working on Buffalo Bill and Teddy Roosevelt, and was there a relationship or not? His book still needs to be published, and I was delving into the art and advertising, the photography, the lithography, and following the publication of my dissertation, I worked with the University of Oklahoma and a series that the Buffalo Bill Center had with them to publish my dissertation on art and advertising in Buffalo Bill's Wild West. There was a collection that became available. And the Buffalo Bill Museum doesn't do a whole lot of collecting right now, and of course, some of you know me from being with me for a whole day. I got very excited about this poster collection because it was 50 posters. A private collector, Jack Renner, who owned a poster collection and ran a gallery in New York City, was ready to start to think about retiring and to find the right place for this collection. And Jeremy and I and others worked very hard with some of the trustees, including Naomi Tate, who I know is on the board here as well, to think about could we possibly acquire these mostly European tour collections. And this is the exhibit that was up at the center in 2024 and into early 2025 that talks about advertising the frontier myth and the poster art of the Wild West. Because of course, the Wild West was putting on a show. No, they called themselves a show. They were reenacting, they were sharpshooting, they were, having the Deadwood Stagecoach out there. And how was that advertised? And I came to understand that many of the practices of the Wild West were actually what I thought were like early modern advertising, like what we know today with celebrities, branding and working with the best artists you could. And that was very different from any other circus poster that I could find, or any other Wild West group, that was advertising, because there were many Wild West tours going on, not just Buffalo Bills. So Jack Renner, who's here in the photograph with his wife Barbara, had these 50 photographs. And you can see some of them are colossal size billboards. And you see Beverly Perkins kneeling down there. She's the conservator who we had to consult before going for an acquisition for the center, because there might be some headaches there with the size and storage of these long-term. But to the benefit of everyone at the center and all of the trustees who were involved, they got excited because it was going to take the center in a new way. It was going to be the largest financial acquisition that the Buffalo Bill Museum had ever done. And it would give us an opportunity to highlight work that myself and many others had been doing for years. I've been a fellow there twice, worked with colleagues who were, part-time PhD students in Glasgow, but all of us working on American West. And thinking about the visualizing of the Wild West. These are a few photos that are in the McCracken Research Library at the Buffalo Bill Center of the West that show you how, sometimes those bill posters were actually wrapping buildings, they were covering fences, they were just covering all and every available building they could and fence that they could, as well as hitting all of the shops, the stores with the smaller size placards that could go at windows. And these are from the UK, and I believe the middle one is from Italy, because a question that I've thought about all day today, Paul, is did William F. Cody, Buffalo Bill, come to Laramie? We got to figure this out. So we were mostly East Coast, with the tours, and certainly in Europe. And we know that Cody makes trips out, he scouts Rest Ranch in North Platte, Nebraska, make sure that the railroad is coming, to Yellowstone and establishing with his partners the city of Cody, Wyoming. But now I'm really interested to think more about Cody and the railroad and Laramie in particular. So if anyone knows the answer to my question, we'll talk later. And when we were able to look through the posters in the Jack Renner collection, I started to, again, think about photography and posters and matching up what I could find in archives that matched into what were then final lithographic produced Wild West posters. So an actual scene showing the canvas, the open air plan, and the construction. And off to the side you can see there was a midway, there was the Wild West Village. Just thinking about what that village looked like, the mess tent, the mess hall, everybody ate there. So whether you were cowboy, cowgirl, Native American, Cossack, Rough Rider, international Rough Riders of the West, of the world, it was everyone coming together. And I think that we need to think really broadly about what kind of space that would be. And I've learned a lot every day working at the National Museum of American Indian of the connections that have always existed with community. And Cody was building community every year on the tour. And we don't know exactly what was happening there, but there's so much correspondence. Some of it's here. A lot of it is up in Cody and in other museums as well. But just thinking about, and I was looking at this last night, look at how the artistic license for how many people were lined up in the poster versus what you see in the photograph. But of course, he was filling the stands. But this was a poster from the Renner collection that I had not seen before. And that was what was so exciting, because here we are in 2022, 2023, when we're thinking about this collection, and I'm advisor to the Buffalo Bill Museum, and I was able to go and see the exhibition of Jack's posters in New York. And I knew I would be excited, but when others got excited who were trustees of the museum, it was really, really exceptional because we were seeing things that we didn't even know still existed. Okay, so I know that there are 550 or so posters in the 3 museums that I mentioned in Cody, at the Ringling, and at the Circus World Museum. But now we were seeing things that were European. And I have to admit, I had to stop my dissertation at some point. I didn't get to do the European chapter. And so, and part of what I had found very late in my dissertation research is the bulk of material that is right here in this building. And those are what I call the elusive business records, because I was searching for 7 years for business records. Now, Jeremy told me I should come to Laramie, and I didn't listen well enough. But you all have digitized, it's 796 pages, Paul, of the business records from the 1902 to 1906 European tour of Buffalo Bill's Wild West. And for me, the reason that it is so exciting, I've looked at every single page online. And there's a key code that matches up the American printing companies with the European printing companies, and how the Europeans were utilizing, copying it sometimes, the content of the posters and then advertising, in their own way across all of the routes that the Wild West would take. And the posters that are part of this collection start, again, more puzzle pieces coming together in this research. So I believe that I'm not done, and that some of you may be on a new journey with me, because I want to just get the megaphone out and say, you all got to, all my colleagues, you got to know about Laramie. You have to see and discover more about what's here, and we need to, how it got here, and all of that. So you all know that I've been very excited today to share my enthusiasm for what can be decoded. All of the business records have all the numbers of posters, tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of pieces of paper that were loaded into the train cars, shipped across the ocean when they were going to Europe, because some of it did go from American printers to Europe. But there were only a few of these lithographic companies who did most of the posters. There were 12 companies altogether, but there were 3 that contracted with Cody and his partners and did the most of the work. So A. Hohen and Company is from Baltimore, a company that was very prolific in the mid-19th century into the turn of the century. If you travel the New York to Washington corridor on Amtrak, you can see the existing original building. There's a photo in the conclusion of my book that I took from the train of the building as it was being rehabbed. I don't know what purpose it will have now, but A. Hohen and Company is easily seen from the train. And Cody made friends. That's what he did. He was very personable, he was very entrepreneurial, and he was moving from his years as a scout and working for the government through the Civil War years, and then got into acting in the 1870s. And did that for a while, and the dime novels started coming out, and there was an opportunity in Nebraska to run a kind of Glory Days, Wild West exhibition in 1882, and he and Doc Carver did that together. And he thought, wow, maybe we have something here. You can see in the correspondence how things come together for the next year to launch even bigger on his own, but never really on his own, because he's got Nate Salisbury, who becomes his longtime partner. He's got John Burke coming on board for publicity, and You know, you can, if you look in any of the route books, and you may have some of those here, I'll find out tomorrow, you can see the lists of all of the people who are working to make this come into a 30-year operation from 1883 to just about 1913. And Cody continues to work the circuit of the shows right up until World War I. You know, as between those years of 1913 and 1916-17, the Wild West no longer exists, but he's working with 101 Miller Brothers and sells Floto Circus and right up until his death in 1917. But here's where he really starts. You know, back in the 1870s, before this, he's working with Hohen, and then as he launches into the Wild West in 1883, these are some of the earliest posters. And it's not just Cody who's represented on the posters, but it is primarily Cody. And you will see that throughout the years. And the youthful Cody into the, you know, white-haired, elder gentleman who is an ambassador, you know, ambassador for international royalty and for politicians and all of the individuals who, you know, flock to these Wild West shows. Again, tens and 20,000 people can fit at times. You can see a little bit of grandstand here. So I started my journey to kind of unpack the posters and think about what I was finding. And when I was able to get to Denver Public Library, I found 1,000 photographs from 1899 and 1900. And that's when Hohen was still producing, and you can see some of the posters that were based on Frederick Remington's drawings and all his work that he was doing with Harper's Magazine, and the relationships that were building between Cody and Remington, and John Burks with the cane. Salisbury, Cody's partner, is on the other side of Remington in the middle photograph, and how Remington would visit. You know, and other artists, you know, were invited to come and see the show, and lo and behold, photography. You know, I don't know who the photographer was, still, or, you know, there was never a photographer hired for the Wild West, as far as I can tell. You know, but in cities and during the tour, photographs were taken. What I do know is that there's another company that goes in and does a lot of photography, and you start to see that. And now, Nate, scrapbooks. You know, boy, was there a lot of scrapbooking going on. Up at the Buffalo Bill Center in the West, there are many albums of all of the advertisements, any article that was in the local paper, wherever they were going. I love the advertisement for this talk tonight because you use one of the Buffalo Head programs. And I've been able to find one for Newburgh, New York from 1896. I'm like, yeah, oh my gosh, I wonder if my little great-grandmother was seeing it when it came to town. But you know, sometimes they're stamped, you know, in there where the program was being sold. But the behind the scenes was accessible to those who bought tickets. You know, you could go to you know, the village, and you could see the Native Americans, many of them Sioux performers who were from the Pine Ridge Reservation. You could see that they were living in their teepees, that they had, you know, their regalia, you know, and their clothing that would be, you know, mixed with Western style clothing. And there was an Indian police force, you know, to take care of each other and to take care of each other when they were, you know, off the reservation, contracted by the Wild West Company with the U.S. government to be able to tour for those 6 months of a year, and then they go back to the reservation, and then next year the whole process would go through again. Cody and his partners worked very hard to make sure that happened, and he made sure that they were paid, that they were fed, that there was health care, and they were getting to see the world at the same time. And so when I finally got a chance to go to Pine Ridge, it was really, really wonderful to meet some of the families who were so proud still these 100+ years later. And so finding these photographs, and there are 1,000 photographs online if you want to look at any Denver Public Library, Western History Department, I start to see the resemblance between what was being photographed and then what was turning into a final chromolithograph or color poster. And these were smaller posters. These were some that would be in shop windows. These were not the billboard that would be showing the Bronco and the bucking horse. And then I found, wow, Rosa Bonheur, this amazing French painter, invited Cody, to come to her studio when the Wild West was in France. And I'm looking through the photographs and I'm like, oh my gosh, here she is in this photograph by the Courier Company of Buffalo, New York, who paid for these images to be made, these photographs to be made in 1899 and 1900. And the artist who works for the lithographic company puts her right in the middle of this really interesting poster that has, Napoleon and Cody in the same poster with this incredible art perpetuating fame. And here we are, all the stops, right? All of it to make sure that Cody was prominent in the advertising, that the showman who was developing was at the forefront, but there was this opportunity to expand the knowledge of the entirety of the show by using occasionally some others in the posters. But this one in particular shows her seated and she's painting the image that ends up on one of the European posters. So there is a very large painting of Buffalo Bill that is held in Cody at the Buffalo Bill Center of the West in the Whitney Gallery. But I was finding these other photographs of him in these, in the poses, that I could also correlate, not just the Rosa Bonheur image, but she was there. She came, she made, her sketches, she started to do the smaller size painting, and just starting to understand for me how everything was coming together. And again, end of the 19th century, thinking about photography must have been included, but again, trying to find, no one had ever done this before. And I thought, wait a second, it's 2000, oh, it's 2010. And I know now that there are dozens of people still with new PhDs, or still involved with PhD work, working on Cody. How is that? Why are we still talking about this? And him, and young people besides my own sons who know the Wild West, because they hear about it probably too much. But we've got these intersections, and we've got Cody trying to reach out to really famous artists of the time. And Remington and Bonheur stand out, but I can't find any reference to any of the other circuses or any of the other shows making these kind of friendships or pulling together this kind of long-term relationship. And also knowing the artists who are working at the lithography companies, going and visiting them. So I was looking for a couple things during the dissertation. I was looking for the business records. I was looking for how photography, impacted or not the posters. And I was looking for original artwork. And I had, and years into my dissertation work, and I still couldn't find it. And it really takes, going to Cody, coming to Laramie, talking to the people who work with the collections every day. And Paul Fees, who'd been a longtime curator at the Buffalo Bill Museum, he had moved on, he wasn't still there, but he and I ended up in the coffee shop, in the cafe at the same time one day, and I said, I'm really looking for this original artwork. He's like, oh, you got to go to Baraboo. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah. The Inquirer job printing company of Cincinnati, Ohio, when that folded after decades and decades of being part of the newspaper production, a lot of the big billboard posters were actually produced by Courier and Inquirer, and they could do them because of the huge newspaper presses that they had and the work that was being done there. So Paul was like, yeah. Nobody's done this before. Nobody's actually seen the original artwork, and he knew that. And he was very gracious to share that with me. He, again, some people get territorial, but not Paul. And I will always appreciate that because I got to see the sketches. Got to drink water. I've been talking a lot today. So you can see an artist rendering from the lithography company, working in Cincinnati, having to, excuse me, get the approval, of the Wild West company, but interpreting whether it was from a photograph or from the artist's imagination, what they wanted to show. And here is just an amazing, truly amazing, detailed cavalry image that shows, all of the Rough Riders and the Native Americans coming into the arena, for the Wild West. And thank you, Baraboo, thank you, Circus World, because they let me get back in the collections and actually unfold this and work back in storage. And I was wowed, the pencil details and then, the shading with the white and the black and the grays and the American flags. It was pretty amazing to think about what went into the creation of this artwork, how much the Wild West was working with those who were creating these posters, and how all the components would come together that I think of, again, as modern in advertising to be able to entice, thousands of people in the US and Europe to flock to this and to create such a persona and such a personality that, he had his ups and downs. There were, some good years and some terrible years, with the money and getting the Wild West, to come to the long term and continue to thrive as a Wild West or circus-like experience, and things were changing with early motion pictures. How do you compete that? Well, you start a Wild West motion picture company, and that would happen in the later years, in the teens, in the 19-teens. But being able to be next to and look at the detail of the drawings and the sketches and the incomplete painting of the original photographs that would then be reproduced in lithographic companies, like the business records that are here, these are the few, collections that survived. And so for me, it was making all of my work, all those years of late nights because I was working and doing the dissertation, all worthwhile because we were sharing something that no one had ever seen before. And those folks that were working at the Circus World Museum, they knew how, I don't have a poker face, they knew how excited I was about seeing these. And I had mentioned earlier when I was downstairs looking at your great digitization operation that I mentioned that I would be coming back and asking to be able to reproduce some of these original sketches in the dissertation and in the book. And before I could get back to that point, they digitized it all. And so when I was ready, they were like, here's the link. There's everything you need. And that's kind of the experience that I found with everyone who's been working in this material with Cody. And I've learned a lot about the relationships again, the creativity that exists, and this man, this Lakota Sioux chief, Irontail, was with Cody for just over 20 years. And to think about how much an impact the Native Americans had on bringing in the crowds to see and how much they were utilized in the newspaper articles and the advertising. There are very few, I think this could possibly be the only one that actually puts a name to a Native American touring with the show. And I was able to research and find this image through the Casebeer collection of Chief Irontail. And he did not want to be photographed like this. He wanted to be in his headdress, but Casebeer asked him to please, sit without it for his portrait. And he actually ripped up one of the existing images of him in his Western attire. But the other image with the headdress on is what is used by the company that is making the Irontail Last of the Great Chiefs poster that was used with the Buffalo Bill Pawnee Bill show, which was run between about 1908 and 1913. And so I was able to find this at auction house and get it for Smithsonian, because there's not much at Smithsonian. So I've been doing all of this research, all of this, all this time, and somehow or other people think I'm the curator of American West at Smithsonian. However, there's very little material, and I think that the National Museum needs to be more fully representational of the American West overall. I know Naoma thinks that, and others, and so anytime I can, have these conversations and everybody knew in my network at Smithsonian how important I felt that these Western collections were, and how much the integration between the history of photography, the Native American experience at the turn of the century, mass entertainment and the growth of that, and modern advertising was all coming together. And that's what made me want to continue to explore this, because there was so much that hadn't been shared, and the importance of one man who wasn't perfect but had the ability to bring people together, think about advertising in a different way, reach out to the leading artists of the time, and have an impact on the quality of what would become part of American history. And we are forever talking about how he becomes a showman. And when I went to Pine Ridge and was able to talk to the Lone Bear family, many of their men and chiefs from Pine Ridge were in the show for many years. Again, you have to remember that Wounded Knee and the last of the Indian wars doesn't happen until 1899. The collection that I'm working with at the Smithsonian is from 1898. So there's still a lot of tension, a lot of context to what is happening as these individuals are performing 6 months a year, and the next year Wounded Knee happens and the massacre there in South Dakota. So they're reenacting some of the experiences. Some of them were at Little Bighorn, and there's contemplation whether Chief Irontail was there or not, but he is also one of the men who whose portrait or profile is used for the Buffalo nickel. And how we start to understand who these people were, who the people were behind the scenes, all the marketing and bill posters and advertising staff that he had. There's still more to learn because, as we know, 100 plus years later, we're still fascinated about how he could accomplish this. And so I am coming, you gotta come see me. Or here we are, like again, and home from the foreign land. So it's been a real journey for me. It's been exciting to get a broader, network of colleagues who are interested in this, and I've got a lot of people to thank. And I was talking to a few of you about how I would love to get many of you, collaborating with some of these other museums, because even if it's only the business and legal records, they are so unique. I have asked everyone, nationally and internationally, who is stewarding collections of the Wild West, and we've never found anything like what you have here in those 796 pieces of correspondence. And yeah, it's a little nerdy, but I'm really excited to look at every one of those pages and put the pieces together of a story that I think really resonates and just has so many different options to talk about, what these 19th century and early 20th century people were doing. It's a different time, no screens, no internet, but thinking about the reality of the West, what the reality was to Cody, what he wanted and how he wanted to portray it, and think about the frontier and the frontier myth all at the same time, and this amalgamation of so much together when you went to see the Wild West. And there are some early motion pictures they run them in the Buffalo Bill Museum, so you can actually see some of the arena and hear some of the songs from the cowboy band, and just see some of the individuals moving in time, and that's really fun for me too. Even though it's in black and white and not color, like all these posters that I've spent so many times, but there's more to learn. And I really, really, really appreciate you being here tonight, and I'm a new huge supporter of all of you and what you're doing here, and thank you so much for taking care of these, and let's do some more work together.
Are you willing to answer questions?
I think I have a little bit of voice left, yes.
Okay. Please.
I don't know, does anyone have a question? Things I didn't cover.
You mentioned a couple of times at the beginning how, first of all, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
That the event that he created, he actually was calling it educational.
Mm-hmm.
So I was
Exhibition.
curious, from your learning from seeing all these images, what was it that he was trying to educate people about?
A lot, right? Because he was ever expanding. His biggest season ever, or the Wild West Company's best season ever, was in 1893, where he brought the Wild West to perform during the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition. And of course, they didn't let him in, but they rented space across the street, and they ran on Sunday when, the World's Fair wasn't open. So, he was there, and they made like $1 million that year. But if you look at the program and you look at the different segments, of course there's a lot of sharpshooting, a lot of horse racing, the Cowboys against the Indians, who's going to win, or there's Indian football with a massive ball that has been kicked around the arena. But then at that moment in time, he goes international. So yes, he's talking about all facets of the American West, including, the taking of, women from, the frontier and, Native Americans, having, involvement with, the Deadwood Stagecoach and, the altercations that happened there. And he's running through all sorts of, different kinds of scenarios that perpetuate a certain myth of the American West. And then he brings in all the military from the Congress of Rough Riders of the World, and that gets even more after the Spanish-American War and the Rough Riders. So he uses the Rough Rider term early, and then Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders in Cuba, get even more publicity. But it's focused on cowboys and Indians. It's focused on some everyday mundane things, like the picnic on the prairie, there's a poster for that, or there's, the meeting of, the U.S. agents, at one of the, Indian villages. He depicts all of it in the advertising, and then he recreates it in the arena. There's a lot of sharpshooting. There's Annie Oakley, there's Johnny Baker, there's all of that. So he's introducing the various different characters who are real people, but they are performing, and there's a lot of reality, and then there's a lot of myth and a lot of, creation of that, fantasy that could be the West if you want to take the train and get out there and live a different kind of life. It might not be an easy life, and it might be dangerous, but then you have 200 Native Americans in the arena, and you have an audience, clapping for them recreating what is, part of their own existence. They're part of their own memories. They're reenacting and being actors in their own life situations. How ironic is that, and how difficult is that, and why would you make the choice to do that? But you have to think about what was being denied. Back on the reservation system was widely happening, and boarding schools were coming into place, and those individuals were not able to live the lives that they had. And in some ways, some people chose to take the opportunity to be on tour. And you could bring your family. You could get away from the hardship of the reservation for a little while. And many of the younger Indians who were traveling knew English. They'd already been to the boarding schools, right? And they were able to, translate as needed with their family, and see the world, see the country, and experience part of that transition that is that turn of the century, and moving forward. They still couldn't vote. You can't, if you're Native American, you can't vote till 1924, and yet they were living in America, being Americans, and being actors in this time. So it's educational, I think is far-fetched, when you think about what they were trying to do, but they're also differentiating themselves from the circus, right? And even though Bailey is an investor, there's very different intent. I don't study the midway, or some of the acts that were not in the arena but were part of that area that I showed in that one poster that showed the whole setup of the Wild West Arena and the village and all of that, and where you buy your tickets to get in. So it's a phenomenon, and it's a phenomenon that runs for 30 years. And anything, we think about these days, what is, so popular, so successful for that long a period of time. There was curiosity, and Cody and his team were, able to take that, be creative, be entrepreneurial, and continue to expand. You know, the popularity of Native Americans in Germany still exists, you know, and in Europe and in France. And there's lots of archives there that document the interactions that that individual performers had with Europeans. There's lots of articles about, European and American women marrying Native Americans, you know, during the tourist stops. So much material still exists to study. And I mentioned the scrapbooks, and there's, you know, I've looked at a lot of microfilm. I'm dating myself, but before they were scanned, you know, in my early years of researching this. Did you have a question?
I was just going to ask, did he get married? Did he have family? Was he actually born in Wyoming? And did he end up like dying a very wealthy man? Or what was his personal story?
A lot of no's there. He was born in LeClaire, Iowa.
Oh, Iowa.
And then they moved to Kansas, and his father passes away when he's very young, about 13. There's a lot of speculation if he rode in the Pony Express. A lot of debate about that. I haven't studied that, so I'm not making an opinion on that. But very early, he is helping to take care of the family, and he does marry Louisa and has 4 children. The son dies at an early age, but the girls grow up, and at least one of them is still living by the time that the city of Cody is coming into existence in 1896, and Irma, you know, the Irma Hotel. So he has a family. It's rocky at times because he's gone a lot of the time. He purchases land in North Platte, Nebraska, and has the Scouts Rest Ranch. I've been there. I've been to LeClaire. You can see I'm making the stops. Now in Laramie. He marries and lives in Rochester, New York for a while. And then he starts in the early 1870s to be an actor. You know, so he's had his time as a scout, in the military. There's lots of questions about the Medal of Honor that he gets and whether he really had a commission or not. He is an actor playing himself. So I just talked about the Native Americans. Then you've got William F. Cody, who doesn't really have to change to get on stage. You know, so there, you know, he's not a trained actor, but there's a lot of success with him on stage. And then this persona, this personality, this celebrity begins in the 1870s and just keeps getting momentum. So he's away a lot. And there was almost divorce at one point, then there wasn't. But if any of you know the story of where he's buried, he lives till 1917. So, you know, the shows had to stop with World War I. That, you know, there was no way to continue to do the kind of touring that they were doing for the previous 30 years. So everything stops for those, you know, war years, and then some of the circuses and Wild West operations continue after that. And many of the Native Americans, I know for sure, continue going to Europe and touring with the different shows. But he passes away in Denver. And Louisa buries him in Golden, you know, where the Buffalo Bill Museum goes. He was, I want to say 70-ish, 70, 71, and he was really slowing down. And even the show had closed as the Wild West, but he was still contracting with other shows to do his same thing. But he was getting more frail, had more expenses. He had invested in a silver mine in Arizona, and that didn't go well. And you know, the show had closed that, you know, had been his livelihood for so long. So he doesn't die with a lot. And he dies in Denver. He doesn't die in Cody, which is where he wanted to be buried, up on one of the mountains there. So Louisa buries him in Golden, Colorado, and his sister lived in Denver. That's why they were staying. But he had a very short illness and passes away there in 1917. So he doesn't live through this period, of the wartime to see what might be on the other side, because he probably would have reinvented himself again, and picked things up and made money again, because that's what he did. Nothing is easy, and you've got lots of personalities in the Wild West. So there were lots of stories about what he didn't do on the road, and so Louisa probably heard some of that, and it was difficult. And then the loss, at times, a couple of children along the way, and that also strained their relationship with the death of several of their children. And Buffalo Bill Museum covers that quite a bit in the museum, who's to say, because you never know what's really going on. But they stay together in the end, and she stayed in Nebraska a lot of the time, and it's really interesting to go visit Scouts Rest Ranches in Nebraska State History Museum and grounds. And if you go in the barn, you can actually see remnants of some of the posters. They've deteriorated, they're in pieces, they're torn, but they've kept it that way. And it's really fascinating to see kind of, all of that. And then of course there are photos that they've added to, place things in context. And in LeClaire, Iowa, I went to, the Buffalo Bill Museum there only last year. And, again, certain things that they have been able to find, there really wasn't anything left. The family left and went to Kansas, but they also, are excited to be the birthplace. And even though the original home that he was born in is in Cody, in the courtyard there between the museums, there's nothing that remained of the family's items, just the shell of the house that eventually made its way to Cody. And that was what he wanted. He had 5 or 6 investors, including George Blestein, who ran the Courier lithographic company and the Courier newspaper in Buffalo, was one of the 5 men who invested with Cody to get that city established. And that was the place that he really wanted to be forever. So. Sure.
I love the posters that you've collected. I wonder, do you see any transition or evolution in their style over the years, or did they always harken back to some golden age?
I always go back to Cody. No, they certainly had. I didn't show a lot of the others who were shown, because all of the different Rough Riders from the different countries, there'd be different posters for them. There'd be different posters for different program segments, and there was a formula to circus advertising, and he took it and ran with it. So some of it is very familiar to the circus images, and then you get Remington, and then you get Rosa Bonheur, and Rosa Bonheur is in the in the poster. Those types of things were just taking it to another level, and I actually think that the quality is higher. Even when Strobridge, who worked mostly with Barnum and Bailey, but they come in at the end of the Wild West to be producing the shows, the poster for the shows, especially for Pawnee Bill and Buffalo Bill, when they were the combination together. I still think that the Wild West was pushing for more. Whether it was, the artwork, the design, the multiple colors, the inclusion of, Buffalo Bill and Nate Salisbury, they just took it a little bit, higher, and people are also studying the circus images, but I have not seen, and again, there's still dissertations being written about, all of this. The focus and the process is not being decoded in a way that I have chosen to do it, because my real specialty is photography, and I've been able to put together. I mean, there are many painters who also used photography at the time, or still even today, for instead of sketching, they use photography. But again, putting back together how this man worked with his team to create something that was so popular, and that, again, when we did the Centennial Symposium for his passing in 2017, there were 36 of us working on dissertations who were presenting. That was crazy. I'm counting everybody, because how does this happen? How are we all sitting in Cody, Wyoming, taking days and years of our lives to think about this, and how it's still important to understand, how that worked, and how the business side of it worked, and how many pieces of paper, these posters, tens of thousands of them, loaded into trains, loaded onto ships, to try to advertise, and how Cody was always at the center, but sometimes he'd take a little step to the side and let someone else take the lead. But he was the one, he was always the one that came out and made the grand, entrance after everyone, had come in. It's pretty fascinating. And he, for many people, still represents the American West, even though, he's, we're not talking about, farming, or we're not, talking about ranches, really. We're talking about someone who used his own persona to get out there and see what, what he wanted to create that was the American West. And, there are people who are working for him every day who are performing, again, their own existence, their own lives.
The best definition I've ever heard of a hero
Mm-hmm.
is somebody who does something that they're not trained for the benefit of somebody else. Do you know anything heroic that Buffalo Bill ever did?
Well, there are writings about what he did when he was scouting. And again, some of the Native American communities that he was involved with at scouting, he ended up then bringing into the Wild West show. So that's a little bit mind-boggling for me at the same time. His heroism, I think, I have not taken an opportunity to research that angle. I wouldn't say that he's interpreted as a hero, but yet in the realm of publicizing the American West, creating an opportunity for many people to think about, what our country could be, what the West, brings to our country. In that way, I celebrate him as a hero just of the West, because he wanted people to know. He wanted people to come. He wanted people to get on the train. He wanted to be able to get that irrigation done. He wanted to build that town. He wanted people to get to Yellowstone. He wanted Europeans to understand that there was this amazing part of the U.S. and these are some of the people, who live there. And so in that respect, but heroic, daily, activities, no, he did get a Medal of Honor for some of, but it was honorary, so there's that. And there was discussion about whether it should be returned or whether he should keep it. There's a whole story about that too. Because, there's, this is before Hollywood, but there's there are a lot of stories, and and deciphering everything is like solving a puzzle. And so I'm still putting pieces together, and there are many art historians who are studying different aspects of the posters or of the Wild West, and hopefully we'll continue to see. But as a figure in American history. I do think he's made his mark, and for the good or bad, whatever you think about him as you read more, an autobiography or biographies, there are a few really great books. Louis Warren wrote one on Buffalo Bill's America, and Don Russell, decades before in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, again, trying to untangle all that was Cody's world and really get at who the man was. I don't think he really wanted us to know everything about him, but we're still trying to figure that out. And so it's, I'm gonna, have to leave it to you individually to, learn more about him. And as we do more research here at the American Heritage Center, learn more about the records that are here, that becomes, part of the fuller story as well.
Yes, there were many prominent show Indians in Buffalo Bill show, and I'm wondering if you've come across any information on how Cody recruited, for example, Geronimo, who's Apache from the Southwest, like meeting up into, traveling up into the North or the West, and I'm wondering what were the recruitment tactics for this?
Well, he had to negotiate with the U.S. government. So whoever the agent was at Pine Ridge or any of the other communities that he went to, he had ideas. He wanted that. He did have top billing, but he wanted to be able to have those seasons of special performers. It wasn't easy. It took a lot of negotiation, working with the U.S. agent at a reservation, having to have the contract set up, and he did that. And, he and his team somehow were able to get the government to agree to have him be responsible and the Wild West Company be responsible for these individuals and keep them safe and well taken care of for the months that they would be. But again, some of them were there for 10 and 20 years. So there's something to be said. Why would you go back that long if you weren't well cared for and paid and all of that? It took extra negotiation to get the prominent, well-known Native Americans into that show. And Sitting Bull negotiated that he could sell his image, and I don't know if they were cabinet cards or what size images, but his autograph signed photographs were available for you to buy at the show.
Have you come across any photos with Geronimo?
I haven't, and I'm
Nez Perce.
Yeah, I have not. So I'm not. I'll have to do some digging to find out, if and when Geronimo was with the Wild West, but. I haven't looked at every archival piece of paper or read every one of the many. The articles that were in newspapers in every city. There is so much, and now newspapers.com, right? You can sit at your computer and you can look up these things, but there is a bulk of all of that material at the scrapbooks at the Buffalo Bill Museum, for anyone who wants to take some time to do that. But I'll find out, but I will follow up on that because I'm really interested to think about Geronimo.
So my other curiosity follow-up on the...
He's walking towards me, which means I'm going to take this one else.
Very short, and I'm sure that you could just give me that one sentence of how much did the show cost? And what would that be the equivalence of that?
To produce? Or to
produce? Well, you looked at the financial records of it.
Only because of what's here. I was looking for what the posters cost. Like I was looking for how much money was put into the paper.
Just the paper.
So I haven't looked at the totals of what it would cost, but it wasn't cheap, because of the logistics, the travel, the salaries even, and just thinking about all that went into it. But there was some really popular years that kept it going, and he, like I said, in Chicago, that was a moment that kept them going for quite a few extra years. So I will look up these extra things that I do not know. But it's just a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for coming out tonight and listening to my journey of.
Thank you very much.
It went too long, which
We appreciate it. Your voice is still good.
Yes.
You can take a couple minutes, but we are, shall we say, on the security watchman's dime at the moment. So do feel free to wander through, take a look at the Barney collection over the Rentschler Road, but please don't all.